Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, January 5th, 2023. More House floor votes for Speaker, but still no one elected to that position, as Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy continues to get close, but not the majority vote he needs. And he continues to negotiate off the floor with about 20 Republican members who've been voting for other nominees. Coming up, we'll hear some of today's debate and talk about this multi-day standoff in the race for House Speaker with Politico reporter Daniel Lippman. President Joe Biden announcing new steps dealing with immigration that he says will increase border security and reduce the number of individuals crossing unlawfully between ports of entry, and also increase legal ways that migrants from Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua can enter the U.S. He says, do not just show up at the border, stay where you are and apply legally from there. The president also talking about his plans to visit the U.S.-Mexico border, El Paso, Texas, on Sunday. Ahead of Friday's second anniversary of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, former Capitol Police Officer Michael Fanone joining a rally on Capitol Hill with military veterans, condemning some House Republicans who he says still refuse to condemn political violence. Arizona's new governor, Democrat Katie Hobbs, delivers her inaugural address in Phoenix, saying she's ready to work with Republicans in the state legislature, and now is the perfect time, she says, to move past division and partisanship as the Republican candidate she defeated, Carrie Lake, continues to claim election fraud decided the race and to pursue legal challenges to the outcome. And Russian President Vladimir Putin ordering his military to cease fighting in Ukraine for 36 hours starting Friday at noon Moscow time for the Russian Orthodox Christmas. We'll get President Biden and State Department reaction. And now to the House floor. This from Politico. Kevin McCarthy's dragged-out bid for the Speaker's gavel fell short for a third day in a row, with Republicans still at a stalemate, despite the tentative deal offered Wednesday night. The offer, confirmed by two Republicans familiar with it, includes a vote on term limits for members, more seats for Freedom Caucus members on the powerful House Rules Committee, and allowing a single member to force a vote to oust the Speaker. That last item is a particularly steep climb down for Kevin McCarthy, essentially guaranteeing that if he does land the gavel, it's never fully safe. That from Politico. Well, before the voting got underway today, the House Clerk, Cheryl Johnson, who's been presiding, spoke about decorum.
Before proceeding further, the chair would like to clarify that as part of the clerk's role during the organization of the House, the clerk has the responsibility to preserve order and decorum in the chamber prior to the election of a speaker. To that end, the chair would like to remind members-elect of the following. Members-elect should address any remarks through the chair and not to other members-elect in the second person. Members-elect should refrain from engaging in personalities toward other members-elect. The chair appreciates the cooperation of members-elect in respecting and upholding order and decorum in the House. Thank you.
The House Clerk, Cheryl Johnson. Before the first vote of the day for Speaker, it's the 7th overall this week, there were nomination speeches. Freshman Congressman-elect John James, Republican of Michigan, nominating Kevin McCarthy of California, also Republican.
There's been a lot of talk about history over the last few days. And 1856 was the last time it took longer than the votes we're having right now to find a Speaker of the House. 133 over 2 months. Without question, the issues divide us today are much less severe than they were in 1856. In fact, there's far more that unite us than divide us, regardless of our political party or our ideology. The issues today are over a few rules and personalities, while the issues at that time were about slavery and whether the value of a man who looks like me was 60% or 100% of a human being. It was a long, drawn-out, painful process, but it needed to happen. And in the end, Nathaniel Banks won by the slimmest of margins. But you know, margins don't matter when your policies are on the right side of history. 'Cause 'History. 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 'Hi On that day, long ago, the good guys won. On that day, long ago, the abolitionists won. On that day, the people who believe in freedom and self-determination won. The leading Republican nominee won then, and the leading Republican nominee will win again today. Since then, our nation's made a lot of progress. That includes families like mine. My family's gone from slave to the floor of United States House of Representatives, being the first member of his freshman class to speak in a series of 5 generations. My family has gone from slave to right here since 1856. My father and mother born in the 1940s and 1950s in the Jim Crow South, and my dad lived directly across the street from a school he couldn't go to because he was black. He started a business with 1 truck, 1 trailer, no excuses, with the help of his wife, and now his son stands here on the precipice of taking back the majority for the American people and taking this nation in the right direction. Yeah. I'm a freshman, I've only been here for a couple days, but I've heard a lot of D.C. politicians tell me about how broken D.C. is. I don't need D.C. politicians to tell me how broken D.C. is. The American people have already told us how broken D.C. is by giving Republicans the majority so we can fix this mess.
John James of Michigan, Republican congressman-elect, today on the House floor nominating Republican Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Congressman Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, rose to nominate another Republican for Speaker, Byron Donalds of Florida.
We are committed to make change to this institution that has lost its way. It is epitomized in the $1.7 trillion omnibus rammed through this institution just 2 weeks ago. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I came to fix this broken system. America has seen that problem for a very long time, too. The commitment to change it is new. The genesis of the prospect of changing it emerges from this moment. And those since June that led at long last to the New Year's Eve statement of Mr. McCarthy and to these 3 days on the floor. America needs men and women of courage to do something new in Congress so that Congress can serve the American people. The Lord said, "Behold, I do a new thing." We need more Byron Donaldses. I know Byron. He's not a prop. He's a man of personal conviction. He arrived at his convictions through authentic and genuine life experience. People ask me, what is the end game? How does this end? The answer to this question is that this is a dynamic process. All of the decisions on this floor result from the coming together of minds, one way or another. This is the people's business. We will resolve the people's business. And when we do, we will go to the mat for the American people.
Congressman Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, on the House floor nominating Byron Donalds for Speaker. Mention of a prop is a reference to a tweet from Congresswoman Cori Bush, Democrat from Missouri, when Byron Donalds was nominated for Speaker on Wednesday. She wrote, "For what it's worth, Byron Donalds is not a historic candidate for Speaker. He is a prop. Despite being black, he supports a policy agenda intent on upholding and perpetuating white supremacy. His name being in the mix is not progress, it's pathetic." Well, the vote results today. Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries getting the same 212 he's gotten throughout the vote series. Byron Donalds got 19, McCarthy got 201, and there was one vote for Donald Trump. That came from Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida.
Gaetz.
Donald John Trump.
Trump.
Also, one member voting present, Victoria Spartz, Republican from Indiana. No one getting a majority, no speaker elected. On the second vote of the day, the 8th overall, same result. Kevin McCarthy getting 201, but not getting the majority he needs. 17 went for Byron Donalds, 2 for a new candidate, Congressman Kevin Hern of Oklahoma, and 1 for Donald Trump, plus that one present. Then to the third vote for Speaker today, the 9th overall, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican of Colorado, who had voted for Kevin Hern in the previous vote, formally nominated him, and in her speech on the floor defended the many votes that have taken place in the search for a candidate who can get a majority.
You see that Kevin McCarthy does not have the votes. You are understanding that he is not going to get there. We had the votes for him. I cannot produce those anymore. The colleagues that I brought with me to offer those 218 votes on the first ballot aren't there anymore. It is not happening. And as it's been said, we need to get to a point where we start evaluating what life after Kevin McCarthy looks like. America doesn't want more talk, and I'm going to keep my speech a little short. They want action. I'll take that. I want to get to work too. America is tired of rhetoric and they want results. This isn't chaos. This is a constitutional republic at work. I'm a mom of 4 boys. I know what chaos and dysfunction looks like. This is actually a really beautiful thing to be here with all of my colleagues debating. Just as the gentleman from Montana said, we have not experienced this in the 2 years that we have served here in Washington, D.C. This is the most debate that has taken place, and I love it. I love the conversations that are going on the floor, in the cloakroom, in the halls. There's nothing extreme, there's nothing unreasonable. We're trying to get this right. As my conservative colleagues and I have stated time and time again, Congress is broken and fundamentally needs change. I'm here to get this right.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado. The results of the 9th vote, and then there was a 10th vote as well, same as the previous ones. Kevin McCarthy getting almost a majority, but not quite. Votes as well going to Congressman Byron Donalds, Congressman Kevin Hern, and 1 voting present. Throughout the votes, as noted, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, has gotten 212 all Democratic House votes available. In a news conference earlier in the day, he was asked if Democrats were willing to help break the stalemate.
Given the unwillingness and inability of Republicans to get a speaker of their own across the finish line, have you all started to talk about what you would demand from Republicans in exchange for votes to help them elect a speaker?
Short answer is no. At the end of the day, all we are asking Republicans to do is to figure out a way for themselves to organize so the Congress can get together and do the business of the American people. Tip O'Neill got along with Ronald Reagan. Ted Kennedy got along with Orrin Hatch. Joe Biden got along with John McCain. Nancy Pelosi got along with John Boehner. Ruth Bader Ginsburg got along with Antonin Scalia. All we are asking is House Republicans to get along with each other so we can get about the business of the American people.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York, the House Democratic leader, at a news conference this morning. With the latest on the race for House Speaker, we're joined on the phone by Politico's White House and Washington reporter, Daniel Lippman. Thank you for being with us. We got 3 days, multiple votes. Where do things stand?
Yeah, so things are still not looking great for Kevin McCarthy. It has become very embarrassing that this has become an all-week story where there was a lot of drama before the voting started on Tuesday about whether he would make it, and those doubts have not gone away. This is, we're kind of witnessing history in front of our eyes because usually these things are wrapped up very quickly. There's no drama on, in one vote, a speaker is elected. And so it's kind of making it hard for the congressman-elect to help their constituents, to get intelligence briefings and meet with, members of the executive branch because they all haven't been sworn in yet. And so right now McCarthy is trying to make some concessions to those Freedom Caucus members to try to get their support.
As those negotiations are happening behind the scenes, the votes are continuing on the House floor. What's behind that strategy?
It's an interesting strategy. I think they view it as, they don't want to stay adjourned forever. And so it's basically putting pressure on both sides, on both McCarthy's backers to try to get those no votes down. And also it increases pressure on the people who are in the Freedom Caucus who are holding this back because I think members of the establishment, McCarthy's allies, they hope that the more votes there are, the more pressure will be on the McCarthy opponents to throw in the towel and that this is, taken away from the country's business.
The last couple of votes, the number of Republicans who are not voting for Kevin McCarthy is 21. But are they a solid bloc? Or are there factions within that group?
I think there's some of them who are more anti-McCarthy and then others. Maybe some want a better committee spot. They're not all as opposed to McCarthy as some of the more extreme ones. And so I think that they all have their reasons for doing that. Some it's maybe a publicity gain, but others just don't like the guy. They don't think he'd be a good speaker. But whoever becomes speaker, whether McCarthy or someone else, is going to be pretty weakened and not actually have that much power because they're going to have given a lot of concessions to all of their members, and they will be pretty weak.
We're talking with Politico reporter Daniel Lippman. You covered the White House. How has the Biden administration been responding to all this?
Well, they don't like McCarthy either, but they also know that this can't go on forever, that they need someone to deal with in terms of trying to raise the debt ceiling and negotiating different bills in the future to keep the government operating. And so they know that it's not going to be a Democratic speaker, but they are pretty kind of quietly gleeful that this is embarrassing Republicans and that President Biden is, yesterday he went to Kentucky with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell about an infrastructure policy. And I think they were opening a bridge or something. And so they want to show that they're rising above the fray and that they're not going to get dragged in the mud to deal with all of this stuff.
And the role of former President Donald Trump seems to be evolving, where he was supporting Kevin McCarthy, but there are some people who are not voting for Kevin McCarthy who support Donald Trump, and he's been posting about this. What kind of influence is he having?
Yeah, I think this is a kind of a test to see how he reacts as someone who is not in an office, and so there's not much that McCarthy can get him to offer or take away from those members of voting against him. And so he, likes that McCarthy has been pretty loyal to him, but it kind of has showed that, even if you're super loyal to Trump, that doesn't mean that he's going to move heaven and earth to help you. And so he's kind of been shown as weaker than he would like because, he hasn't been able to get McCarthy across the finish line. And so it's, I think, Trump is enjoying the mess too. He doesn't want a strong Republican speaker either. He doesn't really care about us that much. And he's not affected because he's not president anymore.
And this is being covered minute by minute by C-SPAN cameras and others. What else have you seen that we haven't covered, that we haven't talked about?
Well, you guys have been doing a great job covering George Santos, who, the disgraced New York congressman-elect, who had been fabricating his resume and probably didn't realize that the C-SPAN cameras were always on, were on him a lot on the House floor. But I think it's just interesting that kind of the horse trading and the, these calls are going late into the night as McCarthy tries to corral his members to vote for him and for him to sew this up. And Republicans have said that, hey, democracy is messy, and we're seeing a lot of democracy on the House floor right now. And this is, this doesn't happen in a place like China. So even though McCarthy doesn't like it, it still shows that people have a voice, and that these members who are doing this, they presumably, their voters don't really care about McCarthy, so they're either happy to do it or they want to stick it to the establishment.
Daniel Lippman covers Washington and the White House for Politico. You can find his stories at Politico.com, and on Twitter it's at @DLippman. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Senate not in session today, but Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan, announcing she will not run for re-election in 2024 when her fourth six-year term ends. Detroit Free Press reporting she gave no specific reason for her decision to depart other than to say she was ready to spend time with her family, including her 96-year-old mother. And also, the announcement is certain to set off a flurry of activity about who will vie to succeed her. The last time Michigan had an open Senate seat was in 2014. One question to be answered is whether Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who just began her second term, a Democrat, could be interested in the job, among many others. Now to immigration and border security. This from CNN. The Biden administration on Thursday announced a program that will allow Border Patrol agents to immediately turn away Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans crossing the border illegally, expanding on an existing effort to stop Venezuelans from unlawfully entering the United States. The administration said it will accept 30,000 per month from the four countries over the next 2 years, while offering them work permissions if they enter the country legally, pass background checks, and have eligible sponsors. The plan imposes new consequences for individuals who attempt to enter unlawfully, expands legal pathways for safe, orderly, and humane migration, surges resources to secure the border, disrupts criminal smuggling networks, and supports border communities. That from CNN. President Biden announcing these measures today at the White House.
Today I'm announcing that my administration is going to expand the parole program for people not only from Venezuela, but from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti. Again, these four countries, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti, these four countries account for most of the people now traveling into Mexico to try to start a new life by crossing the border into the United States of America on the southwest border. We anticipate this action is going to substantially reduce the number of people attempting to cross our southwest border without going through a legal process. In fact, today I'm announcing that Mexico has agreed to allow to return up to 30,000 persons per month who try, get caught, and get sent back from those four countries, who are apprehended while attempting to unlawfully cross the border, the southwest border. My message is this: if you're trying to leave Cuba, Nicaragua, or Haiti, or have agreed to begin a journey to America, do not just show up at the border. Stay where you are and apply legally from there. Starting today, if you don't apply through the legal process, you will not be eligible for this new parole program.
President Biden at the White House. He also gave some details about his trip to the U.S.-Mexico border this weekend.
And next week, I'm going to travel to Mexico, where I'm going to meet with President Lopez Obrador. We have a big agenda that ranges from the climate crisis to economic development and other issues. But one important part of that agenda is strengthening our border between our nations. And I will visit the border myself this Sunday in El Paso to assess border enforcement operations, meet with the local officials and community leaders and the folks at the border sending me what they need that they don't have, and make it public what they conclude they need they don't have, to try to convince my Republican colleagues they should do something. And I know that migration is putting a real strain on the borders and on border communities. They can't do anything but that. We're going to get these communities more support. And I want to thank all the nonprofits, the faith groups, the community leaders, and other volunteers who will make sure that vulnerable immigrants have what they need to survive, whether it's food, warm clothing, shelter, medical care, right after their arrival. These religious and civic groups represent our nation's generosity, the best of our country. And they really do. They really do. And they're a powerful rebuke to the hostility and even the hate which many people face when they arrive here legally.
President Biden today at the White House. He also said the actions we're announcing today will make things better, but will not fix the border problem completely. And again, he called on Congress to pass the comprehensive immigration reform plan he sent them at the start of his presidency. After the president's prepared remarks, he took a couple of questions from reporters, including one on his visit to the border.
Mr. President, why did you decide that now is finally the right time to visit the southern border? Republicans have been calling on you to do this since the beginning.
Because Republicans haven't been serious about this at all. Come on. They haven't been serious about this at all. I wanted to make sure that I knew what the outcome, at least the near outcome, was on Title 42 before I went down. We don't have that yet, so I had to operate. I don't like Title 42, but it's the law now. I have to operate within it. My prediction is, it's nothing particularly insightful about this, Title 42 is going to go away before the end of the year in terms of the Supreme Court, my prediction. And then we're going to have to use Title 8. 8, right? Am I right? Yeah, Title 8. 8, 9. And which we can implement what we're doing here plus some other things. But so I wanted to make sure there was a rational way in which we could begin to announce it. But I couldn't wait once the Supreme Court ruled that they're not going to make the final decision on Title 42 for some time, for another, who knows, probably not till June, in that range, although I don't know that for a fact, to be able to lay this out. But look, Mayorkas is waiting to impress you all kidding aside.
President Biden at the White House. Some reaction from Republicans. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee tweeting, just a few weeks ago, President Biden said he hadn't visited the southern border because there are more important things going on. Glad he found the time to pencil it in. And this tweet from Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. President Biden's border speech today was long on rhetoric and short on substance. For 2 years, he has done nothing but blame root causes and point fingers while ignoring a crisis of his own making. American communities are suffering, and the president has no plan to stop the pain. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Pre-order your copy of the Congressional Directory for the 118th Congress. It's your access to the federal government with bio and contact information for every House and Senate member, important information on congressional committees, the President's cabinet, federal agencies, and state governors. Pre-order your copy today for delivery in March. It's $29.95 plus shipping and handling, and every purchase helps support our nonprofit operations at cspanshop.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A story from The Hill. Several Democratic members of the House and former U.S. Capitol Police Officer Michael Fanone are calling on Republicans to condemn political violence on the eve of the second anniversary of the January 6, 2021 insurrection. 4 members of the House, who are also veterans, gathered on Thursday with Courage for America, an organization pushing against what they call the extreme MAGA agenda, and Common Defense, a veterans organization that advocates against hatred and violence and for an equitable and representative democracy, for a press conference pointing to the ongoing threat of political violence. That from The Hill. The rally was held on the west front of the Capitol building. Here is Michael Fanone.
If I could guarantee one thing about the new House majority, it's this. This is just the beginning. This type of chaos will happen every single day in the House. As some of the most extreme politicians our country has ever seen hold our democracy hostage. I should know, tomorrow marks 2 years since the day I almost died defending the Capitol from people who thought overthrowing the government was a good idea. The events that day felt like a wake-up call for me and many others that political violence is real. The worst part is that our elected leaders allow this to happen. And yet this week, people who encouraged and even attended the insurrection are now taking their places as leaders in the new House majority. People like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said insurrectionists would have won on January 6th if she had been involved. Or Representative Matt Gaetz, who encouraged voters to arm themselves at the polls. Or newly sworn in, or soon to be sworn in, Representative Derek Van Orden, who breached police barricades with the insurrectionist mob on January 6th. Yesterday, I delivered a letter to Marjorie Taylor Greene, signed by over 1,000 veterans, active duty service members, and military family members, demanding that they condemn political violence in all its forms. We cannot afford to brush political violence under the rug or turn a blind eye when others encourage it. I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years about thinking what it means to be courageous and how I can best demonstrate courage in this moment. For me, being courageous means speaking out so my 4 daughters can live in a country without fear of political violence from the MAGA movement that is putting their futures at risk. That's why today I'm proud to announce that I'm joining the Council of Courage for America. A new campaign pushing back against the Republican House's extreme MAGA agenda that puts political power over the rights and freedoms of Americans.
Michael Fanone, former U.S. Capitol Police officer at today's rally on the Capitol grounds. It was hosted by the groups Courage for America and Common Defense. The White House says President Biden will mark the 2-year anniversary of the January 6th attack on Friday by awarding the Presidential Citizens Medal to a dozen state officials, election workers, and law enforcement who demonstrated courage and selflessness during a moment of peril for our nation, according to the White House. That is, they defended the U.S. Capitol against the assault that day or stood up to then-President Donald Trump and his allies who sought to overturn the presidential election. Arizona was one of those battleground states in the 2020 presidential race that Donald Trump lost narrowly to Joe Biden. And that continued into 2022, where in the gubernatorial contest, Democrat Katie Hobbs barely defeated Republican Kari Lake, who was endorsed by Donald Trump. And today in Phoenix, with a mariachi band providing entertainment, Governor Hobbs was formally inaugurated. In her speech, she promised to try to work with Republicans.
Today represents a new chapter in the story of our beloved state. It is a chapter that will be written by you, your families, your neighbors, and the communities you love. It is a chapter that will once again prove that the power of democracy, the power of the people to make their voice heard in free, fair, and secure elections serves as the foundation of what makes our nation the greatest on earth. Your voice and the voices of your fellow citizens, no matter who you voted for, have been heard loud and clear at our state capitol and across the nation. You embraced the challenge before us and rejected those who seek to divide, to pit Arizonan against Arizonan, community against community. Instead, you sent a message that it's time your elected officials worked together to find real solutions and to build an Arizona for everyone. As a born and raised Arizonan, I am honored you have entrusted me the power of this office at this critical time for our state. You, the people of Arizona, gave me a clear directive. Find common ground, work with people and not political parties, and embrace the challenges that stand before us. I pledge to you that I will not forget this charge, because just like you, I see challenge as opportunity. It's not always going to be easy, but just like Arizona, I never back down from a tough fight.
Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs, a Democrat, at her inauguration today in Phoenix. She beat Republican Kari Lake by 0.6 of a percentage point. But Kari Lake continues to claim that she lost because of voter fraud. A court has ruled against her, but she is appealing that ruling and asking for the case to go directly to the Supreme Court. Kari Lake spoke about that on Tuesday in a phone interview with JustTheNews.com. She also talked about the fact that Katie Hobbs took the oath of office today at the inauguration in Phoenix symbolically, because Katie Hobbs was officially sworn in on Monday at a smaller ceremony.
The media was not invited. They had one photographer that was invited to the swearing in.
Unbelievable.
Obviously, my basement, I called her Basement Biden, Basement Hobbs opponent is afraid of the media still because they might ask her some tough questions about this botched election, where she feels that free and fair elections really don't matter, shouldn't be determining an election. It should be how many laws you can break to make sure that you have a botched, rigged election. And that's exactly what we had in Arizona. And that's why I'm fighting it.
Yeah, you are. And you said you would fight it, and you have lived up to your word. I want to ask you about the latest request to go right to the Arizona Supreme Court. Tell us why that's important.
Well, this case is going to eventually make it to the Arizona Supreme Court no matter what. So there's really nothing to be gained by waiting on taking this for the Supreme Court. They should just, we believe, grant us that request. Right now, the appeals court has filed our appeals brief on Friday, New Year's Eve. We're really pleased that the appeals court has set briefing schedules, and then they have put on a schedule a date for possible oral arguments for January 24th. But as I said, there's really no reason to put this on the appeals court when no matter what happens, this will end up with the Arizona Supreme Court. And so we're asking the Supreme Court of this state to take this case up. The governor is not duly elected right now. Right now, Hobbs has not been duly elected, and this must be resolved as quickly as possible. So we're asking them to allow the skipping over the appellate portion of the court system and go directly to them. And we have very strong arguments. We will win on the merits. We will win on the evidence when they take a look at it.
Kari Lake, former Republican nominee for Arizona governor, interviewed by Just the News on Tuesday. Daily Independent in Arizona writes that the State Court of Appeals will consider later this month whether to expedite a bid by Kari Lake to overturn the results of the gubernatorial election that she lost by more than 17,000 votes. You're listening to Washington Today. From NBC News, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his military to observe a 36-hour ceasefire in Ukraine for Russian Orthodox Christmas this weekend and called on Kyiv to do the same, a move that Ukraine appeared to swiftly reject. Kyiv indicated its forces wouldn't observe the ceasefire and has long viewed suggestions of a truce as efforts to buy time from Moscow. President Biden asked about this today.
So the ceasefire proposed by President Putin in Ukraine for the Orthodox Christmas on January 6th, 7th, have you heard about that? Do you have a reaction to whether it's...
I'm reluctant to respond to anything Putin says. I found it interesting. He was ready to bomb hospitals and nurseries and churches, and on the 25th and New Year's, and I mean, you know, I think he's trying to find some oxygen.
President Biden at the White House. More on Russia's 36-hour ceasefire in Ukraine for the Orthodox Christmas holiday. Questions at the U.S. State Department briefing with spokesperson Ned Price.
The president already spoke to this, I realize, but maybe you have a more formal response. On the ceasefire that was announced by President Putin, does the United States have a reaction to this? Could it be a good thing in some ways, or are you skeptical about the intentions?
Well, this is really a better question for President Zelensky, and that's because, of course, it was Russia that invaded his country, that invaded Ukraine, but I can offer our perspective on this. From our perspective, there is one word that best describes that, and it's cynical. It's cynical in large part because it comes just days after Moscow perpetrated these New Year's Day attacks on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, its civilian centers, following repeated days of attacks against similar targets. And I hesitate to even call them targets because, again, these are civilian centers in many cases. So as you can tell, we have little faith in the intentions behind this announcement. Our concern, it's a concern that you heard from Secretary Blinken in his end-of-year press conference a couple of weeks ago, is that the Russians would seek to use any temporary pause in fighting to rest, to refit, to regroup, and ultimately to reattack. And so in that sense, it can't be considered a ceasefire if the intent is to train their fire with even more vengeance, with even more ferocity, with even more lethality against the people of Ukraine. If Russia were truly serious about peace, about ending this war, it would withdraw its forces from the sovereign territory of Ukraine. That is what constitutes an end to this war. It is what we have called on Russia to do. It is what the Ukrainians have called on Russia to do. It is what much of the world has called on Russia to do.
State Department spokesman Ned Price. Ukrainian presidential advisor tweeting that Russian forces must leave the occupied territories. Only then will it have a temporary truce. And the tweet continues, keep hypocrisy to yourself. From Reuters, a new U.S. weapons package for Ukraine will include about 50 Bradley fighting vehicles. Two U.S. officials said on Thursday, with one of the officials saying the package will be worth roughly $2.8 billion. All this was confirmed today at the Pentagon briefing with Press Secretary Pat Ryder.
We'll start with AP. Lita.
Thanks, Pat. On the Bradleys, since the White House obviously said that some are coming for Ukraine, can you talk a little bit about what are the benefits, what will this bring to the Ukrainian forces on the battlefield? How long will it take to get them to the Ukrainian troops? And can you just give us a broad idea of how long the training will take?
Sure. Thanks, Lita. So as you highlight, I can confirm that another round of security assistance for Ukraine is anticipated tomorrow, and that, as the White House has indicated, that new assistance will include Bradley fighting vehicles. And so I'm not going to have any specific additional information to provide at this time regarding other aspects of what that pending security assistance package will look like. But as always, we'll be sure to keep you updated. In terms of what the Bradleys bring, it is obviously an armored capability that can transport mechanized infantry into battle in support of both offensive and defensive operations, providing a level of firepower and armor that will bring advantages on the battlefield as Ukraine continues to defend their homeland.
Timelines?
In terms of training timelines, again, we'll have additional updates to provide in the coming days. I'm not going to go into that now. Again, once we have an official announcement, other than to say that training both on the operations side and maintenance side will be part of that effort. Thank you.
Pentagon Press Secretary and Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder in the Pentagon briefing room. More from the Reuters article about the Bradley fighting vehicle. The armored vehicle with a powerful gun, which is manufactured by BAE Systems, has been used as a staple by the U.S. Army to carry troops around battlefields since the mid-1980s. Wall Street today, the Dow down 339, NASDAQ down 153, S&P down 44. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.